You were told cougars were wiped out of the Midwest more than a century ago, that the nearest wild breeding population sits over 1,000 miles west in the Black Hills of South Dakota, that anything with a long tail in Illinois is a house cat, a big dog, or a story. But something has been walking through the Chicago suburbs, a body on a north side street, corroborated trail cams in the collar counties, DNA on scat, a state agency that quietly rewrote its own language, and one case that forces you to reconsider what the word extinction really means. Start with the case nobody can argue with. April 2008. A residential alley on the north side of Chicago, Roscoe Village. 2 flats, small yards, street parking. A resident spots a large, tawny animal moving between garages and calls the police. The first officers assume what any of us would assume. Someone's exotic pet got loose. Something you could hide in a basement. They corner the animal in the alley. It reacts the way a stressed apex predator reacts. Shots are fired. The animal dies on the pavement. Then the story stopped being simple. When the carcass went to necropsy, the picture that came back was not an escaped pet, not a zoo cat, a young, healthy, wild male cougar. Lean, muscular, no collar, no microchip, no trimmed claws, no worn teeth from cage bars. DNA work later linked his lineage to the Black Hills population of South Dakota, over 1,000 miles from the alley where he died. Sit with the distance. A wild cat crossed most of a continent on his own paws, through farmland and highway and river and edge of town, and ended his run in a city alley. No hoax, no misidentification, no witness at dusk squinting at a yellow dog, a body, DNA, a lineage. The debate stops being, was there a cougar? The debate becomes, how did he get here? And how many others made the same trip and never got shot? If you live in Illinois or a neighboring state and you've ever seen something at the tree line that didn't match anything in the field guide, leave it in the comments. Your description might be one more data point the range map still refuses to draw. One shot fired in an alley is a headline. It is not by itself a pattern. Consider the cases without a body, the ones that live on SD cards in landowners' kitchens across the collar counties. Lake, McHenry, Kane, Will, rural edge properties past the last subdivisions where corn meets timber and a creek runs through the back 40. This isn't wilderness, it's the seam between a major metro and the working countryside. Landowners run trail cameras for deer, whitetail bucks, doe patterns, coyote traffic. Once in a while, a landowner pulls a card and finds something else. The frame is at 4 in the morning, infrared, grainy, a large, tawny cat moving low along a fence line. First assumption is bobcat. Every landowner knows bobcats have been filling back into that country for 2 decades. The card gets shown to a neighbor, the neighbor says, big dog. The argument sits there, until somebody measures. Here is the piece of physical detail that decides these cases. Write it down. A bobcat has a tail shorter than its own head. A cougar has a tail at least 2/3 the length of its body. Not close. A rope of a tail thicker than a broom handle. Scale a frame against a fence post of known height, ratio tail to body. And that measurement kills almost every misidentification a rural witness will ever make. The frame gets scaled. The tail is wrong for a bobcat, wrong for a dog, wrong for a coyote, wrong for the biggest house cat you've ever seen. The landowner calls the wildlife officer. At first, the officer will not confirm. That's not a cover-up. That's protocol. One frame isn't enough. So the officer asks a fair question. Does anyone else in that drainage have cameras? Sometimes the answer is yes. 3 properties down. Same week. Same tawny cat. Same direction. A 4th camera the following month, further along the creek. One trail cam is a photo. A corridor of them is a route. That's the second kind of weight. Not physical, like a body, structural. The animal isn't guessing. He's following water and cover the way every dispersing cat in the species' history has. Which raises the question the range map cannot answer. Where is he coming from? To answer that, stop treating each Midwest sighting as an anomaly and start treating them as the expected output of a system that has been quietly running for over 2 decades. The system starts in the Black Hills, the closest wild breeding population of cougars to Chicago, at or near carrying capacity for a long time. When a population fills up, adult males hold territory. Young males don't. They get pushed, and they walk further than almost any other North American mammal. Biologists have been radio-collaring dispersing juveniles since the 1990s. These aren't cats wandering 30 miles and settling. These are cats crossing states through the Dakotas, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Some turn around, some die on highways, some keep going because the entire eastern half of the country is empty of resident male cougars, and the biology tells them to keep looking. The record case is one you may remember. June 2011, Milford, Connecticut. An SUV hits a cougar on the Wilbur Cross Parkway. DNA traces him to the Black Hills. Same source population. He walked from South Dakota to Connecticut, through the Great Lakes region, past every camera and highway and dog and gunshot in between. Now, put a map of that route next to a map of Chicago. The suburbs sit directly on the dispersal corridor. Rock River, Fox River, Illinois River. The whole drainage network runs east-southeast, exactly the direction these cats are moving. Here's the reframe. It is not surprising that cougars are appearing in the Chicago suburbs. It would be surprising if they weren't. The biology predicted this. The range map is what failed to update. Presence became the expected outcome. Absence became the extraordinary claim. Which brings me to the case that isn't a case at all. It's a sentence, and where that sentence used to sit and where it sits now tells you more about what has happened in Illinois than any single trail cam ever will. For over 100 years, the official position of the state was clean. Cougars had been extirpated from Illinois by the 1860s, trapped out, shot out, driven out with the deer they lived on. If you asked the Illinois DNR in 1990 whether there were cougars in Illinois, the answer was no. That answer was correct, based on real survey work, real hunter records, real absence of physical evidence. The extinction call in its time was honest. Then the confirmations started. Whiteside County, in the year 2000, a cougar shot on private land, a wild animal, not an escape, another killed by a train near Morrison, another in Randolph County in 2013, the Roscoe Village cat in Chicago, a handful of others across the west and north of the state, each one investigated, each one confirmed as a wild disperser. And somewhere in the middle of that string of confirmations, the language on the state's own page changed. Not with a press conference, not with a headline. It just changed. The old sentence quietly became something more careful. Occasional dispersing individuals confirmed, no evidence of a resident breeding population. A sentence rewritten to match what the animals were actually doing. I don't say that as an accusation. It isn't corruption. Confirming a cougar creates work. Public communication, livestock protocols, hunter questions, political calls from counties that don't want new predators. The path of least friction is quiet language. So the language shifted, and most people who grew up in Illinois never heard about it. That is the deeper reveal. The animal changed the map while the map stayed the same for a full generation. The update came in a footnote. Before this all sounds like every sighting is real. I owe you the counterweight because most cougar reports in Illinois do not survive scrutiny, and pretending otherwise is how this field loses credibility. The Black Panther sightings that come in every year almost certainly are not cougars. Melanistic cougars have never been documented anywhere in the species range, from Canada to Patagonia. Not one confirmed specimen. A large, dark cat crossing a road at night in Illinois is far more likely a big feral house cat than a jet-black puma no biologist has ever verified. Blurry single frames get faked, resold, and recycled so often that a lot of viral trail cam footage is the same dozen pictures rotating. Escaped exotics from private ownership account for a real fraction of odd sightings. Witnesses under stress, at distance, at dusk, routinely double the size of what they saw. Any honest look at Illinois cougar reports concedes that most dissolve when you push on them. That is not a threat to the case. That is the case. Because after every one of those filters, misidentification, hoax, captive escape, stress error, a specific residue remains: the confirmed animals, the bodies, the DNA-matched dispersers, the corroborated corridors, and that residue is not random. It clusters along the exact routes the biology predicts. So the question to walk away holding is not, are cougars in Illinois? The question is, what does the surviving residue tell you about the pipeline feeding them in? Here is the check you can run in 5 minutes from your kitchen table. Pull up your state's DNR page directly, not a summary map on a wildlife blog. Look at the confirmed incident list, county by county, year by year. Read the language the agency uses now and compare it to what it used to say. That comparison alone will tell you more about your state's wildlife than any general range map ever will. If you have a trail cam frame you were never sure about, do the tail measurement. Scale it against something in the frame of known height. Ratio the tail to the body, not the color, not your gut estimate of size. The ratio. And when you weigh any wildlife mystery claim, work a short list. What is the physical evidence, and can somebody else reproduce it? How credible is the witness, and what did they preserve? Is the sighting biologically plausible given the animal's dispersal range, source population, and the corridors between? Does the historical record support presence, absence, or a slow return? Has the agency itself quietly moved its language in the last decade? And after every honest, skeptical filter, what survives? The question stops being, is it real? The question becomes, which specific line on the map does this case redraw? What you were taught about the wildlife of your state is probably a decade or a century out of date, not because anyone lied to you, because the animals kept moving and the paperwork didn't. There is no confirmed breeding population of cougars in Illinois. That is honest. But there are confirmed wild cougars in Illinois. One of them died in a Chicago alley. Another walked past cameras on a river in the collar counties. And a third is on the DNR's own list from a county most people couldn't find on a map. Trust your senses when the evidence stacks up. Stay skeptical when it doesn't. The map is not the territory, and right now, in a lot of places, the territory is walking through it. If this reframed how you think about your own state's wildlife, watch the next one. Because the cougar isn't the only quiet returner, and the pattern I just showed you gets stranger the further east you go.